What's going on, guys? This is me, TheRealMossi, with another Battlefield 3 quick tip for you. This time we're going to be taking a look at the best IFV setups, so let's get started. IFVs are infantry fighting vehicles. Currently there are three different kinds: the BMP-2M, the BTR-90, and the LIV-25. But there could be new types of IFVs in the upcoming DLC. Now, we all know that the IFV can accommodate up to 6 players max, but it's not very practical to carry around half the team in one vehicle. Not only that, but most people would get bored and leave. So you'll end up with 2, maybe 3 people if you're lucky. A driver, a gunner, and a passenger controlling the guns in the side windows. The 3-person configuration would be ideal. The passenger can move from window to window depending on which side the action is. This way they won't get bored. Alright, let's move on to the setups. I'll be going over a simple beginner setup with early unlocks, a powerful advanced setup with late unlocks, and a balanced lone wolf setup. The beginner and the advanced setups require a gunner and or a passenger, whereas the lone wolf setup is solo. Alright, let's start off with the different options available to the driver in each of the 3 slots. In the upgrade slot, you'll have the following options. In the brackets, you'll see the experience points required to unlock each of the options. In the gadget slot, you have these options. And in the weapon slot, you have these options. The gunner and the 4 potential passengers can each contribute one of the following upgrades to the IFV: the proximity scan, maintenance, and thermal camo. So if you have one of these 3 upgrades equipped, they'll benefit the IFV regardless of whether you're the driver, gunner, or passenger. Now, like I said before, you're not going to have all 6 seats filled. Ideally, you'd like to have 3 seats filled, but even that's a stretch unless you're playing with a clan or a squad. So my setups will involve a 2-person configuration, a driver and a gunner. If you're lucky enough to get and keep a 3rd person in the passenger seat, get them to use one of the 3 upgrades that the gunner's not using. Alright, let's start off with the beginner setup. It's a straightforward setup with early unlocks. In the upgrade slot, you want belt speed. Belt speed allows your primary weapon, so the IFV's default cannon, to reload half a second faster than normal. This is particularly useful for beginners who have a hard time aiming. Even if you miss a couple of shots, you can reload faster and be ready to go. One important thing to note about this upgrade is that it only applies to the primary weapon. It has no effect on the secondary weapon, that is, the weapon you'll be adding to the vehicle weapon slot. In the gadget slot, go with the IR smoke to break enemy lock-ons, but if you find that the enemy isn't using any lock-on weapons like javelins or guided missiles, switch to one of the optics. In the weapon slot, go with the ATGM launcher. This is the earliest weapon unlock. This is basically a point and shoot missile that you have some control over once it launches. Point it at a target and fire. Once fired, keep the target in the IFV's line of sight and the missile should make its way to the target. You have some freedom with this launcher. You're not confined to locking onto vehicles. You can shoot it at pretty much anything you can point it at. Now for the gunner. The gunner has an option between one of the 3 following upgrades: proximity scan, maintenance, and thermal camo. The one that is most useful is the proximity scan. If you happen to have a 3rd person in the IFV, get him to use the thermal camo. Alright, now on to the advanced setup. This is a very solid setup. It provides great defense and great offense. In the upgrade slot, the driver should go with the reactive armor. Reactive armor adds an extra panel of armor to each of the 4 sides of the IFV. Each of those panels of armor can absorb the equivalent of 1 RPG hit before being destroyed. When a reactive armor panel absorbs damage, it saves your IFV from taking that damage and losing health. I'll do an in-depth review of the reactive armor soon. Let's move on to the gadget slot. The choice is pretty much the same as the beginner setup. Smoke if the enemy uses lock-on weapons. Switch to your favorite optics if they don't use lock-on weapons. Now for the weapon. All 4 weapon options are pretty decent, but we can eliminate the LMG because you have a gunner with a mounted machine gun. Now we're left with 3 choices: the ATGM launcher, the APFSDS-T shells, and the guided missiles. Out of those 3, my favorite has to be the APFSDS-T shells. and I'll tell you why. But first, what the hell do all those letters stand for? APFSDS-T shells stands for Armor Piercing, Fin Stabilized, Discarding Sabot with Tracer Shells. From now on, I'll refer to it as T shells to save some time. So why do I like the T shells over the guided missiles or the ATGM launcher? Easy. You get 6 rounds with the T shells and only 1 round with each of the other 2 options. These 6 rounds virtually allow for continuous fire. You fire the 6 shells in your main cannon and switch to the T shells when the main cannon is reloading. You empty the 6 T shells, then switch back to the reloaded main cannon when the T shells are reloading, and so on. This gives you continuous firepower and never leaves you vulnerable or without ammo while in the process of reloading. On top of that, unlike the guided missiles, the T shells are free fire weapons, so you don't have to wait 3 seconds for a lock on and leave yourself vulnerable. With the guided missiles, if the enemy happens to use smoke, you'll have to lock on all over again, during which time the enemy will be pounding you with his T shells. Oh, and one more thing, the T shells allow you to be a threat to both vehicles and infantry. You can shoot these shells at infantry just like you shoot the IFV's main cannon. The only difference is they don't have any explosive splash damage, so you'll have to get a direct hit on infantry to kill. That's not to say that the guided missiles are completely useless. They can be very useful if you have a team that laser designates targets. The IFV's guided missiles can lock onto both land vehicles and aircraft if the aircraft has been laser designated. On maps like Noshar Canals, if you can get a teammate to laser designate those pesky scout choppers, the guided missiles are a very viable option. Alright, as for the gunner, proximity scan is the best choice again. Let's move on to the lone wolf setup. I'll go through this very quickly. In the upgrade slot, you want the proximity scan since you don't have a gunner to give you that. The proximity scan is very useful and vital if you're on your own. It'll save you from those C4 surprises that we all love. In the gadget slot, go with the IR smoke at all times, even if the enemy isn't using lock-on weapons. Here's why. The IR smoke not only breaks lock-on, it also provides cover. Since you don't have a gunner to get out and repair, you'll have to do it yourself. Pop the smoke when you get out and repair. This will give you some cover. The smoke can also be used as a last resort when you're in over your head and you need to make a quick escape. Finally, go with the APFSDS-T shells in the weapon slot for the reasons I covered earlier. Since you're on your own, you'll need the T shells' versatility and ability to go after both vehicles and infantry. Alright guys, here's this week's quote of the week. Try to guess where it's from. And try out these IFV setups. Hopefully they'll help you kick some ass. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want more. Thanks again, I'm TheRealMossi. Tell your friends about me.